like sin and God cannot coexist. You know, God is pure, He is holy. And so He says, you know, my people are sinning against me, my people are rebellious against me. And so eventually, if this continues, I will leave the temple where His Spirit at that time, they believed, was dwelling. But for the people in Jerusalem, they felt safe because they knew that in the temple in our city, that's where God is. We may not serve Him or worship Him, but we're okay because He's there with us. And God says, I'm not just here. You know, it's a two-way relationship. You know, and the people of Jerusalem were just so used to take, give me, give me, give me, give me. Now, what healthy relationship do you know works like that?
Yeah, because we always think of ourselves, me.
Me. And so it says, the glory of the Lord now moves away from its, this is chapter 9, verse 1 to 11. And I'm just summing this up. Is the glory of the Lord now moves away from its resting place in the temple's inner room, called the Holy of Holies, and it moves to the temple dome. Ezekiel hears instructions given. Every individual in Jerusalem who is grieved by these sins is to be marked, and when the city falls, his life is to be preserved. The rest are to be slain. And so, God tells Ezekiel, say, tell the people about this. And says the people who are grieved by this sin, the people who find remorse and are convicted by the sins, those are the people who find salvation. But the people who refuse and don't care and continue to do what they wish, He says, those people will be slayed. Eventually, there will be judgment. Now, I like to always mention this, is that when it comes to God's patience, God's patience is long-lasting, but it's not everlasting. He's patient with us for a very long time.
Long-lasting, but not, no, that's a good one.
But not everlasting. His patience is long-lasting, but not everlasting. Because the people, He's been patient with them since Moses. From Egypt, serving those gods. From the wilderness, serving the other gods. From coming into the promised land and serving the gods of the Canaanites. That's hundreds and hundreds of years compact in there. And then finally God says, I can't. I've been patient with you. I've been patient with your forefathers. I've been patient with your ancestors. I've been patient with your grandmother. I've been patient with your mother. I've been patient with you. Now there's judgment. It's long-lasting, but not everlasting. All right, chapter 12. Chapter 12, verses 1 to 16. As Ezekiel eats and drinks, he trembles and he shakes violently to mirror the terror that the inhabitants at home will feel. The popular saying in Judah that dismisses the warnings God's prophets as merely something for the distant future with no meaning for today will be silenced. The judgment will no longer delay. And so in this one, what Ezekiel does is he shakes. He's shaking, he's trembling, and he's eating. And for some reason, it seems that he feels the judgment coming. He feels pity for the people who will be judged. And he's eating it, and he's shaking. And people are like, why are you scared? And he says, because of the judgment that is to come. And so here's a prophet who you see eating a scroll. You're like, that's not healthy. Sleeping on one side, that's not healthy, Ezekiel. Shaving his head with a blade and a sword and his beard. You're like, are you okay, Ezekiel? Now they see him next shivering and they're wondering, Ezekiel, are you okay? And he says, I'm telling you about the impending doom of my people. And you know what people say? The people respond to this and say, we've heard this before. We know. It's not even probably going to come in our time. It's not for us. Whatever. Now, Obviously, this has passed.
They
But
didn't
this-
know that probably will come to an end.
Yeah, and
As they say that this is not, we have had that before.
yeah, and they say this is no meaning for today. It's not for us today. And today's time, we're like, turn away from your sins. Jesus is coming back. Is it really for us? It has no meaning. It doesn't really apply to us.
Yeah.
And obviously, because we're reading this, we know it has passed already. But the people responded to Ezekiel the same way. It doesn't really apply to me. It's not for us. And then you're like, Chapter 14. This one is very interesting. Some of the Israeli elders come to Ezekiel to ask direction from God. The Lord reveals they have idols in their hearts. What do you think that means? The people, the elders come and they say, we need help, Ezekiel. And so the Lord reveals to them and says, you know what the problem is? You have idols in your hearts. What do you think that means?
It means that in their hearts they didn't have anything to do with God. They were worshipping idols or something like that.
Well, Samantha, what do you think? Having an idol in your heart.
It's like the thing that consumes you. Like the idol is your number one thing rather than God. Like it's a priority.
Yeah. This, I think, having an idol in your heart can have many different meanings, but I think for this one, it's the people who came to Ezekiel, I think, were merely concerned for themselves. And they didn't care much about the other people. They said, hey, God, Ezekiel, what can I do so that God can help me? So that God can bless me? And the idol in their heart, I think, was themselves. Because they were not concerned about the other people. They were saying, as long as I'm okay, as long as I'm fine, as long as I'm good with God, that's okay. But you see the way the kingdom of God is set up, it's not just about us. We're to love God and love people. Love God, love people. You can't love God and not love His creation. You see, what if I can give you a quick history lesson, is the Jewish people had about 613 plus laws. And they asked Jesus which one is the most important. And He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And the same is equally as important, is love your neighbor. And so He takes 613 laws and He brings it all the way to here and He says, love God and love people. And then just before He dies, He tells His disciples, just in case you forget that I've told you, I've condensed 613 to 2. And if you can't remember the 2, I'll tell you one. Is love one another as I have loved you. If you remember that, then that's okay. And so He takes 613 laws and He says, let me pack it. Love one another as I have loved you. And how does God love us? When we sin against Him, He forgives. When we forget about Him, He still pursues us. When we hurt Him, He still loves us. When we don't deserve grace, He still gives us grace. When we don't deserve mercy, He still shows us mercy. When we don't deserve the blessings He puts in our lives, He still gives them to us. Though we don't deserve that He serves us, that He still gives His life for us. He says, hey, they're not even concerned about what I'm here to do, but I'm willing to die for them. And He says, that's the one command. Follow that one. Love one another the way I've loved you. The standard is the way I have loved you. That's how I want you all to love them. Not just love yourself. Not just love the people who love you. Because it even compares that. He says, why would you do that? Even the pagans, Even the witch doctors love the people that love them. There's no difference. Everyone does that.
Yeah.
But it's loving those who hate you, loving those who are unlovable. He says, I'll take 613, I'll make it one. Love one another the way I've loved you. And when these priests came to Ezekiel, God says, you've forgotten something. You're concerned about yourself. What about the people? The hundreds, the thousands, what about them? That's the idol in your heart. It's you. And that's who needs to be crushed.
Okay, can I just ask you something? Because you said God compressed from 613 laws. I don't know which are the other one. Apart from love God, love one another.
Yes.
I have loved you. I just want you to explain to me that one, please.
Okay.
About the laws.
About the laws. So, Jewish people, they have a certain amount of commandments and laws that they had to follow. Most of these laws were laws given so that the people could live with each other. Well, you find these laws mostly in Leviticus as well.
Leviticus.
Yeah. And for instance, and like for the 10 Commandments, you know, the 10 Commandments are love the Lord with all your heart, you know, don't commit adultery, stealing, lying, and all those kind of things. But if you look at them, the 10 Commandments, part of them are in relation to loving the Lord. Because why would you serve any other gods if you love the Lord? Why would you use the Lord's name in vain if you love God? Because if you love Him, then you wouldn't have to remember not to serve any other God. You didn't have to remember to use the Lord's name in vain. But then it switches to people. It says, now it talks about people. He said, don't commit adultery, don't be envious. You know, don't steal another man's wife. But you see, if you love that person, why would you want to steal from someone you love? If you love that person, why would you want to steal their wife or their husband? And so it says, hey, the root of it is love. Because you wouldn't do those things if you actually loved that person. You know, and it talks about, for instance, talks about an eye for an eye. The law was basically, if someone steals from you, you go back and you take the same thing. But the two work in place because it says if someone hurts you, if you love that person, the last thing you want to do is hurt them, but you want to help them come to a better place.
An eye for an eye was the during Moses' laws, I think.
Yes.
But that before Jesus Christ.
Yeah, before. And Jesus came and says, you've heard it say an eye for an eye. But now, when someone slaps you on the cheek, what do? You don't slap them back.
Give the other one.
Give the other one. Because what love, the thing is, because love is a very powerful element when it comes to Jesus, when He talks about it. He says it takes us there because He says don't just go 1 mile, go the extra mile. You only go 1 mile when you don't care because it's the law. The law says I have to go 1 mile.
Yeah.
But what does love say? Love forgets the law and says I'll go the extra mile because I love you. I'm not just content to go 1 mile, go 2 miles. And that's what Jesus talks about when He talks about the power of love. And that's why I'm saying, like, so when all these commandments here, Jesus says, actually, if you just focus on love, I wouldn't have to tell you all these things if you actually loved the person. I wouldn't have to tell you how to worship me, because if you loved me, you truly would want a relationship with me. And it's so interesting when you look at all the writings of Paul, when he says the church is to be like this, the church is to be kind, the church is to build one another, to edify one another. The church is to go reach out and spread the good news and the gospel. Where is he getting these things from? He's not getting them just randomly out of nowhere. He's relating it all back to that commandment that Jesus gave. It's because, hey, edify the church, one another, is because of love. Reach out and tell people the truth of the gospel is because you love those people. And so, and remember, you know, the awesome thing is it talks about if you speak in the tongues of angels, you know, if you give away everything that you own, if you do miracles and all those things, but if you don't have love, it's empty. It's pointless. You know, I think sometimes we forget that, like, Love is
So-
such a major theme in the Bible.
We do.
But, guys. No. We're only on chapter 12. Chapter 14, sorry.
14.
Okay. So, class is done. When we come back, we're just going to go, right? And then we're going to go on Daniel.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to do this is the second, we're going to go partly on Ezekiel, cover things quickly, and then we'll go into Daniel. But in case you were wondering, what is the book of Ezekiel about really? It's the book of Ezekiel is the judgment upon the Israelites, and then it's the judgment on the foreign nations, and then it's the restoration of the Israelites. That's really what the whole book, 48 chapters, is about. Obviously, there's a lot of detail. Obviously, there's a lot of practical application in it. Obviously, there's visions and various other things. I'm just telling you like a nice, brief summary of it. But there's 48 chapters in there that are full of just beautiful things. But,
Basically sums up.
yeah. Yeah, and so I've just basically summed up it. But there's some really interesting things that we'll just cover quickly. But your next teacher is... Who is your next teacher?
Has to be.
Yeah. All right. Let's